And thanks for joining me, everyone. Welcome to the program. I am pleased to announce that my book is now available um, at Amazon Books. God is God. God is the creator and the lawgiver. It is, it's. I guess you might say it's what I've done during the pandemic, which is study God and write this book. I'm looking forward to interviews. I'm humbled by the opportunity to do interviews. I'm awestruck by the possibility and opportunity to talk about God, which is something that is not really an area that I'm used to getting into. I'm used to talking politics and culture and have done so over the years as a radio host, as an author. And this book is a major departure for me. While I approached the book and I approached the issue as the usual intellectual exercise, which is how I approach all of my books and interviews, looking at history, looking at philosophy, looking at politics. And the book is largely that. Nevertheless, the book has resulted in, I would say, a fairly profound experience for me personally, a spiritual experience, one that I did not expect. I'm not someone who is prone to mystical experience. I consider myself to be, and I've always been somewhat of a rational, secular American Jew. I mean, that's my background. And I've always believed in God since I can remember. And but beyond that, I never really expected to experience or know God. And I feel that this book has caused me to know God more. And now I'm in a position where I'll be discussing this with various radio people, et cetera. And it fills me with a great deal of awe inspired nervousness, I guess, the idea of talking about God, because here I am, this usual peon. I mean, just a poor schlub, as it were, discussing the king of the universe. It is an enormous responsibility, but maybe it's because I'm getting older. Maybe it's a lot of factors in my own life, but I feel compelled to do it. I feel compelled to share my thoughts with others. Maybe somehow it could benefit someone else. And the experience has made me also not only get to a better understanding that God is God, and I do demonstrate this in simple scientific terms, that there is a God, and that this is a God that created the universe. It is a God that exists outside of us. We are not gods. We are mere images of God. And I get into why that is and how I show my proofs of that by doing it rationally and looking at nature and looking at reality to prove that not only does God exist, but that we are, every human being, every life is an image of God, every human life, and that every existing life was created by God. But humans are images of God, which is what makes us separate from all other species and all other living beings. And that I came to realize, and I argue that there are existing abstract truths, moral and ethical truths, that transcend any particular religion or any particular society. They are truths that are knowable. They are truths that are applicable to all of us within the context of our own unique religion and culture. This is not a sectarian book, even though I am a Jew. I believe that religions are different organized means of worshiping the same God. Not all religions worship God, of course, and some religions very well may worship, an anti-God. Certainly, ideologies do. But I'm pointing out that God is universal because God is true. That every human being has the ability to know God, which makes us all equal under God. We're born equal, we die equal. We're not equal literally because we're different and we have different circumstances. But we are equal in terms of our ability to experience God, to look within, to know truths. I'm experiencing this. I mean, I can't really describe it per se, but I am. Yeah, this certainly has happened to me in different times in my life. Looking back, where I've had moments of crystal clear awareness, and deep thought and the ability to discern truths. And I believe that every human being can have these moments. And I think that is the moment when we know God. And as such, we're able to debunk falsehood because we're surrounded by falsehood and always have been. There are people who are constantly trying to deceive us. There are ideologies that deceive us, and that these are things that we get caught up in. And part of the ability of human beings to reason, of men and women to reason, and reason is what separates us from animals. It's what makes us images of God, our ability to reason and to use the tools of reasoning, the main of which is language, the ability to speak, means that we can discern truths from falsehood. We can discern good from evil. And part of our responsibility as individuals in our own lives is to try to discern what is true and what is false every day that we are alive. Every minute when you wake up, you wonder, what is going on around me that is true and is real and what isn't, and what is going on within me that is true and what isn't. And we can't always know. In fact, we may not ever fully know, certainly. Otherwise, we'd be God. We won't ever fully know. But we can know a lot, and we can see a lot of things that maybe we imbibed in or embraced that are not true. And by not true, I mean that are not natural. That which is not natural is not true because it is attempting to overthrow nature and nature's God. And by letting ourselves know these truths, we can, I guess you might say, debug ourselves. We move falsehood from our lives and become better people, more clear, more advanced spiritually, and more connected to the greater questions of existence, and improve not only our lives on every level, but improve the lives of our fellow men and women, of our society, and of the world. Now, this book has given me a clearer view of the mission of Judaism. I am a Jew, and I really have begun to focus on what that is and how Judaism has embraced falsehoods and heresies that have damaged the spiritual body of the faith. And I get into that at length in this book. I talk about what I argue are conspiracies against God and man, and specifically conspiracies against Judaism, many of which have wormed their way into the Jewish fabric and have damaged our mission in life, our ability, our purpose, our meaning. And that meaning, in a nutshell, and this is an idea that permeates the Torah and the Talmud and Jewish thinking, is to know God, the one ineffable God that created the universe, that gave the law. As my book says, God is the creator and the lawgiver. And by the law, I mean the Greek term for that is logos, the ultimate reality. I mean, things, understanding of the order of things and what's right and wrong, that these were created by God. And it is our responsibility as Jews to understand that, to strive to learn that, to know God. And as such, to try to serve as an example to all of mankind, to our fellow human beings, so that the entire world will come to know God. That's what's meant by the light unto the nations. That's what's meant by the chosen people. We're not chosen to control anyone on earth. There are people who are anti-Semitic who view that, and there are Jews who view that, by the way, and have done so in one of the great heresies, probably the greatest heresy within the fabric of Judaism. Our job is not to control anything on earth. Our job is to serve God. Our job is to know God and to worship God, and as such to serve as an example, because we are supposed to raise our spiritual level and our moral and ethical level and our moral and ethical practice to a degree that we can demonstrate God's mission and God's purpose in terms of why God created us and what God sees for the good and what he sees for our mission on earth. So I get into in this book a lot of talk about Judaism. I also talk about anti-Semitism and where I think that came from. And I delve into some controversies, which I'm not going to get into right now. I'm not saying you have to read the book. I'm probably going to get into it as I go and I interview people and am interviewed. And that is whether or not the Jews were responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus, who Jesus was, what Jesus, how I see the mission of Christianity, which I see in a very positive way, and who I believe Jesus was from a Jewish perspective, and how Christianity, which is the ministry of Jesus, how that led to the creation of the United States, which is why I think we are an exceptional nation, and which is why I describe in the book Jesus, in the broad sense, was American, not in the literal sense, in the philosophic sense. So these are some of the issues I've gotten into in my book. I'm looking forward to interviews and reviews and talking with fellow YouTubers and radio people and television and whatnot. I want to start out slow with that because I want to develop a certain, swagger. It's like I was telling Michael Shaw yesterday. It's like when you start a Broadway show, you don't want to go, call the big critics right away, or you're going to be in a rock concert. You start out in a small venue in a suburb, and you try it out for a while and see what works and doesn't, and you acclimate, and then you take the next step. Same thing like with a pitcher in a baseball game. You don't just go out and start pitching. There's a process by which you warm up and you build up to it. So that's where I am with the rolling out of this book. It's a fascinating process. I'm looking forward tomorrow, by the way, to being interviewed by David, who is a big YouTuber, and he's a friend of mine from YouTube. He's been on my show, and who does a lot of talk on religion. He happens to be an Orthodox Jew. But I'm looking forward also to talking with adversaries, atheists, anti Semites, anti American types, communists, people who are not well disposed toward belief in God and who don't admit that they too believe in God. Because I would argue, and I don't mean this in a chauvinistic way or that I'm smarter than anyone else, but I do argue in my book and I do try to demonstrate that every single human being today and historically, and indeed every animal, right down to the single cell amoeba, believes in God. They do. And the reason they believe in God is because God is true. It's because God is God. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I want to thank you for joining me. You can get my ebook. It'll be available in softcover in a couple of weeks, but right now it's available at Amazon.com. God is God. God is the creator and the lawgiver by Charles Moscowitz. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a great afternoon.